This is fantastic. I think we just kick off, don't we? It's possibly already recording, so poker face, and yeah. Um, Welcome to everyone who is joining us at the Found Families discussion pretty early on in the weekend, so we're all very fresh. So my name's Ella Saxey. I'm going to be inviting the panel to say who they are, why they think they're joining this discussion in particular, and also who they would like to be in a found family. You could be a character in somebody else's work or your own work, or just a generic role. I think I'm here mainly because I think I write short, queer, weird fiction, but insufficiently family-based stuff, which I'm realizing now. And I think I'd like to be an ambivalent parent figure. I've been who's got a lot going on. I've been rereading The Dark is Rising. I'd quite like to be sort of Merriman in that, or Garnet in Steven Universe. So yes, I will hand over. Greg, do you want to kick off?
Sure. My name's Greg Klumpner. I write mostly short fiction. I'm also editor of the Triangulation anthology series, which should be coming out this year, should be coming out in July. Let's see. I'm joining this discussion pretty much because I love the whole found family genre and trope, and I'm currently working on a novel that has that element, and it's a YA, and I feel like a lot of YA in particular has that found family as everyone's kind of like searching for their next thing. So that's very cool. And I guess just because of recency bias, I'm watching Shadow and Bone right now, and I loved Six of Crows. So I loved most of all the Jesper character, and I kind of want to be that train wreck of a person that kind of like throws everyone for a loop, but has a nice sense of wit and brings everyone a little bit of joy in the meantime. So that's me.
That's fantastic, and we can definitely carry at least one of those. Brilliant. Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen Spurko. I think I'm on this panel because I do a podcast about Our Flag Means Death, which is a great example of a found family, and we talk a lot about it. And as I think I mentioned to the folks before the panel, in my book, which is coming out this summer, Horn and Heartsword, it is a found family in a sense. It's a group of people who grow and become closer over time. But honestly, I don't think I would want to be in either of those because the chances of getting killed are far too high. So I think I would pick a very sedate, in my twilight years. I think my choice would be I'd love to be with Dr. Mensa in the Murderbot books, but not like out with Murderbot. Its life is also too violent and exciting. But I think back home, I can't remember the name of the farm. Dr. Mensa has the lovely polycule and a very sort of lovely life, and that's like Hobbiton. That'd be okay too. Maybe set up a little like self-governing autonomous commune somewhere on the edges of the Shire. I'd be fine with that. But and I think my role in either of those would be the drunk uncle.
Brilliant. We will keep that for you. And Rosemary, hello.
Oh, hi, I'm Rosemary Jones, and currently I'm writing in the Arkham Horror series published by Aconite, and all of my books, when I'm writing for Aconite or when I was writing for Wizards of the Coast and I was doing Forgotten Realm novels, I realized, with family, either found or biological. One of my most popular Forgotten Realms books was City of the Dead, about a family who lives next to a graveyard in a spooky house in Waterdeep and basically maintains the graveyard. And then, as somebody said, it's like the only D&D novel about all the NPCs. So that was great fun. And the Arkham Horror novels have been sort of spinning off a group of friends who get together to become movie makers in the 1920s, and they are doing a silent movie in a haunted house and Mask of Silver, and one of them comes back to investigate in Deadly Grimoire and sort of forms other connections. And the book that is coming out in November, which was just announced today, is Bootlegger's Dance, which again brings back some more of these characters, and we get to meet the bootlegger and her niece and kind of the family they've built around themselves in Kingsport. So, and it's a Christmas novel for Arkham Horror. So, I was pitching this like mad last year, going, no, it'll be really fun. We'll have Arkham Horror and Christmas and family. So I am always doing this, and I guess there's a lot of family. I mean, I would drop into the Adams house in a heartbeat and hang out with Wednesday and Morticia and Gomez because they are the most lovely, crazy biological family who brings all these other people in and makes them their family. Um, but in real life, and the one that I keep kind of spinning off of for the Arkham Horror novels there was an arts college established in Seattle called Cornish College that I actually briefly worked at and got really entranced with their history in the 1920s and 30s when Nellie Cornish started it and basically threw open the doors and said, everybody come, study art, study dance, study music, teach the way you want to teach. And Mark Tobey got on a train at age 20 with a bag of oranges and went out to this college. Merce Cunningham blew through there as a teenager. Young black dancer Sevilla Fort in like early 1930s is there being their muse, and then she goes on to train Alvin Ailey. And there's this period between about 1926 and 1935 when this place is popping. Everybody is coming to hang out in this beautiful brick building up on Capitol Hill in Seattle and just create art. And if I could time travel, I would be at the Cornish College Found Family in a heartbeat. So that's my found family, and bits of their story gets tucked into my Arkham Horror stuff. So you can find out more about them if you go there.
That's phenomenal. Thank you. People are having chats in the chat already, which is great. If you want to put any links in there, any comments, pop in questions, I'll come back at the end and hoover up questions from you all. So yes, we've met people we know where they'd really like to be. So my opening question for everyone would be, why families? What's so great about this? Why is it better to gather people around you than to be an individual hero? So why do you read it? Why do you write it? Would anyone like to be off first?
Oh, I could do on that one. I've got this. There's a phenomenal book out there by Gail Carringer called The Heroine's Journey, which I actually finally discovered last year. And all of a sudden it went, oh, this is why I'm writing this, because there's two types of fantasy. There's the hero's journey, which we all have probably heard about because of Joseph Campbell, where you're Luke Skywalker or Frodo, and what you have to do is essentially cut all the family, go it alone, and solve the problem, and then you can never really go back, and you are always lonely, and it's very, very sad. I don't do well with sad. I like happy endings. Gail has actually taken this and turned it around and called it the heroine's journey, and you don't have to be female. You can be female, you can be male, you can be non-gender, but it's the person who gathers all the group of people around them, biological family, friends, or whatever, and defeats the big bad that way, and then remains within the group, the happy ending. And two fabulous examples of those just recently is, of course, the Wednesday Addams Netflix series, where Wednesday thinks she's abandoning all her family. She thinks she's going it alone. And by the end of the series, she's got a whole newfound family of friends and even hugs. This is like the big killer moment in that series. And last week, I finally got to go see Honor Among Thieves. And it was very interesting to see this because WotC, when I was writing for them, wanted everything to be hero's journey, the lone guy, nobody's left standing, it's smoking ruin at the end. If you see Honor Among Thieves, it's a total found family story about our sweet Harper dude's going to go rescue his daughter. And to do that, what does he got to do? He's got to gather his group of friends and go off on a bunch of random quests, like any good D&D campaign, and succeed. It's a happy. I'm sorry if I've spoiled this for something, but there's actually a happy ending to this movie, which made me so delighted. So I'm pledging into the prequel novel that's written by my friend Jolay right now, which is the same thing, and it's just lovely.
I'm going to circle back to adventuring bands. But yeah, sorry, Jen,
I was just gonna say, I absolutely second your thoughts about that movie. I think the fact that we all started by like imagining our found family, like where we would fit in, is exactly why we like to read found families. Like there's room for everyone, or maybe not everyone, but there's a place that, that your skills, thinking about like Honor Among Thieves, right? There's a space for the face, the charming, kind of talker. There's a place for the, the fighting, the muscle and so forth, and that's where do I fit in to, you know, Rand al'Thor's story in The Wheel of Time? I mean, I'm watching him, like I'm in the crowd waving at him. And so I think that's part of what's great about it is we as readers or listeners or viewers or whatever can fit into that story more in a way. Like and it's just, you get a greater diversity of kinds of people and a greater diversity of kinds of skills and narratives coming together. And I think that's fabulous.
Yeah, I pretty much have to echo that entirely. Just the idea of having
Yeah,
uh,
that's me.
all these different perspectives coming from different backgrounds and different places, and whatever it is that brings these people together and creates that conflict between them and everything. It just gives a really nice way to see how a lot of different perspectives interact with each other and how they come together and collaborate to solve whatever problem, be it the big bad or um, we see it more in some hope punk now. Like it's a pretty big thing there. So yeah, just that collaboration of so many different ideas and ideals.
Yes, and I love you've just got the capacity for more dynamics, more people, more dynamics, more conflict, more hugs.
Always
Thanks.
more hugs. Always
Always
more hugs.
put them in, yeah. Feel free to hug each other in the chat if that's all right. So we want to get as many people together as possible and kind of weld them. So I was thinking about how do people in fiction find their families and what kinds of sort of genre or configuration work nicely for them. So we talked a little bit about kind of pulling enough people together to defeat the big bad. We've got adventuring bands. I'm definitely going to come back to adventuring bands. Like colleges, institutions that pull people together. What are some of your favorites?
And I'll go first here. Uh, like I mentioned before in the introductions, yeah, anything kind of school related or any type of confined space. The popular one is, everyone on a starship or whatever, or even, oh, I'm trying to think of like even like a heist or a murder story or something where everyone's stuck in a closed room, or in horror that's pretty common. Although those are a little more to the point and direct and quick, it still creates that bonding experience for everyone and brings everyone together that way. So yeah, I think in general, like entering a new world that is a confined space really forces the issue to some degree in a great way.
Yeah, I think that's great too. And I think that confined space idea is really great. And you get that in other kinds of narratives too, but I think classically in space travel. But I think one of my favorite examples, and I'm stealing from Cheryl in the chat, is Critical Role. All three, but especially the second campaign. And I think what you have there is slightly different. It's the opposite of a confined space. It's literally, I mean, in the second campaign, an entire continent, more than one continent sometimes, but there's still like a goal, right? And so what you have, it's a little bit of the old cliche of like, like a lot of classic sports movies, like can this plucky gang of ragtag losers somehow pull together to win the pennant? It's that basic idea, right? That's my favorite found family. And you see it on Our Flag Means Death, right? The misfits, this group of people who, maybe have been told or have not succeeded or been told they can't succeed. They're misfits from one society or group or another, but they fit together, like, not smoothly maybe, but they do somehow manage to kind of offset each other's strengths and weaknesses to achieve that goal. And that's my favorite sort of trope, is that group of misfits, but individually, yeah, maybe not so successful, but together they make it work. And I love that. I never get tired of that.
Yeah. And I can address, like, somebody just popped up, is it found family even with a healthy biological family relationship? And yes, in my books, you can have both. I really don't go with Tolstoy on only unhappy families or interesting stories. I think happy families, I think functional families, I think families that work have as many interesting stories in them as any other type of family. And to me, what's always fascinating, and probably because I'm an only child, is kind of these relationships that people build out with brothers and sisters and wives coming in, and then maybe the wives' family and all this other stuff, that you start seeing all these new connections. And then, like, all of us, you go off to work, and often in my book, somehow the work group becomes a secondary family, and then they cross with the biological family, i.e. my group of gravediggers and stone carvers and Waterdeep, who are actually based on my family. I'm always stealing from my family history too. So one of my ancestors carved monuments for Chicago graveyards in the late 19th century, early 20th century. And so so I'm like, that's kind of a strange thing to be doing. And then what would it be like if you grew up where that was everybody in the family did that. Everybody in the family somehow worked in the graveyard. And the graveyard was haunted and has magic and has ghosts. And then, you can throw all the other and topiary dragons, and then it gets really fun. So yes, I think dynamics. I mean, if you think about the stories we tell each other, think about fascination with families from the Kardashians to the Windsors. We get very, very interested in how people handle these dynamics because we're always dealing with them in our own lives. I mean, everybody's life is how do I make my relationships work? How do I make my collaborations work? What am I doing? And so I think, as a novelist, you have just infinite ways to go. And what's really cool is the new emphasis in the last few years on inclusivity, diversity, the acknowledgement that everybody's family's got a lot more ramifications than maybe fiction reflected even 10 years ago. And I mean, there's nothing that you can find in fiction that you can't actually turn around and find in real life. And I think that's what's really encouraging to me about this whole trope. It's, as you said, it's hope punk, but I think it's also really how we solve the problems of the world, is that we learn to accept each other.
Yep. And I liked Jen saying that,
I
people.
got a little heavy there. Sorry.
Yeah, Jen saying, maybe we don't fit together perfectly at first, but that's what creates the narrative friction. And yeah, I really like, Rosemary, in your in the Deadly Grimoire, that somebody who's got enough kind of business needs and connections that just sort of picks people up and gives them work and finds things that they can collaborate on. And I felt that was a really nice way to sort of kickstart
it. Well, like I said, there actually is nothing there. There's nothing fantasy. I write fantasy, but I always try to find the real world person that kind of grounds that. So Deadly Grimoire, the heroine is Betsy Baxter, who has risen from starlet to the head of a movie studio in 1920s Hollywood. And you're going, it's a young woman and she's cute and she's doing this. Well, how could you do that? Well, let's look at Mary Pickford, who was the sweetheart of America and also the founder of United Artists. And she wasn't the only female founder of studios, but she was probably the most famous. And she, Charlie Chaplin, and Douglas Fairbanks essentially formed United Artists. And, they were, she was married to one of them and friends with the other one. And these are the things that, I say, you can always find those stories and then you can spin them off into suiting whatever your speculative fiction, fantasy fiction is.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I have a panel on historical queer fiction near the end of the weekend. So do you stick around and come back from that?
Yeah, and there's wonderful, wonderful history all the way through. I mean, nobody's making this stuff up. You can polish it, but there's just so many wonderful stories out there.
I'm British, so I'm quite fond of pubs as hubs for found families. I don't know if anyone's read any of the KJ Charles's romances. That rather than I heard her speak, and she said that usually in a romance series, often you'll kind of marry off all the siblings, and she didn't want to do that partly because she wanted all her characters to be queer, and she wasn't sure that would hang together, and so she had a kind of a pub as a meeting place and as a foundation for people to start their families off. So we've got heist teams, we've got pirate ships, we've got spaceships. We have anywhere else that you want to locate families that you've seen nice examples?
Well, I think the arts. I mean,
All
anytime
over,
you,
yeah.
anytime you've got somebody doing the arts, you know, if they're putting on a play, if they're doing an opera, you know, whatever the arts is of your culture that you're writing about, whether it's future, past, or present, I can tell you, arts people are crazy because I've lived, you know, I've worked and lived in this field for way too long. But they, you know, they hang out together all the time because they have this passion for what they're doing, and they can only do it if they're collaborating. So that's why making a movie, putting on a play, I worked for an opera company, putting on an opera, you know, running a museum, which is where I work now. The other people outside your little venue probably don't quite get what it is you do, but the people inside it really, really do and really, really want to be there. And so, yes, you form rather intense relationships. Yeah, hi, fellow museum people.
Yeah.
It reminded me, and I popped in the chat there. Kings of the World brings that beautifully together. Has anyone? It's both an adventuring band, but it's definitely based around a kind of getting the band back together, Blues Brothers motif. And so the narrator is the Axeman, who's basically the guitarist, and the wizard is the guy on the Moog. And but yes, fantastic.
I was gonna say workplaces too. I know Rosemary,
Yeah.
you mentioned that, but you know, some more than others, right? And I don't know that it's industry specific, but you think about something like Empire Records, the movie Empire Records, like that's a found family. And we all, I think a lot of us have maybe had that experience. I see you nodding, Greg. I'll let you jump in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking about like that whole grouping of like The Office and those type of shows like that. Superstore was one of those. They have the new one now, American Auto, and you know the first season they're usually all trying to find their own place in it, both as characters and you know like as part of their family. And as you go on later in the seasons, you really see how they are really like bonded together for whatever it is, whether it's
I think once everyone's found their place and all the rough edges have been knocked off, is that kind of the end of the plot? Or I suppose you
No.
can have more adventures, can't you?
No, because then they get into more trouble. You know, I just finished I'm gonna muck the title, but it's The Adventures of Amira Al-Sharifi, which is the newest series spun off by the author of City of Brass. Absolutely fabulous. It's kind of if Sinbad was a 40-year-old woman with a bad knee and a kid. So it's historical, fantasy, fiction, female captain. She's got terrible taste in husbands. And she's sailing about the Indian Ocean and running into all the very wonderful and strange mythology that is, you know, best known to us in the West in the Arabian Nights. So it is a total. As I'm a complete Sinbad freak, this was such my jam, this thing. And of course, her whole crew is her found family. She's got the poisoner, she's got the navigator, she's got, you know, the kid that you got to look out for, the teen. You know, it's just fabulous. I will throw it into Discord or something. That I think I was throwing it up on my I'm reading things, but
I'll try and capture as many of these for the Discord as possible, and
yeah.
kind Souls are putting things in the chat already. You mentioned you've got everyone you need. You've got the kid. You've got the. I want to segue into saying, so what kinds of niches and roles do you love to see in found families? We've got Greg is being our kind of slightly chaotic cousin. I'm keeping tabs on everyone as the ambiguous parental figure who's got a lot on. Yeah, well, do you need to have kids? Does it work better if there's like people to look after? Who do you like to see? What kinds of roles does it? We've got drunk uncles. Who else are you looking for in your ideal found family?
I think there's usually a caretaker person that takes care of the, goofballs like me who need some adjusting now and again. Yeah, that really stands out to me right off the top of my head, just because I know my character would need that. Just yeah, I mean that's my first one. Anyone else?
Yeah, and I would just tag on to that there might be a leader who is not necessarily the caretaker, right? Like somebody who, and by leader I don't mean somebody who gives orders, but again, since Rosemary mentioned Honor Among Thieves, like Edgin is the leader. He doesn't necessarily like they don't necessarily follow his instructions, but by that I mean he's kind of like the central point, like the magnet, if you will. But I think in that group, Holga's the caretaker.
Oh, yeah.
So those are not competing roles, but complementary ones. But I do think it helps to have someone, or maybe a pair of someone's. I'm trying to think of other examples around which the group can sort of coalesce, right? Not the boss, but that center point. And it could be also be the caretaker.
Yeah, well, again, it gets back to the heroine's journey, which Gail's not paying me any money for this, so like, just go out and buy the book though. We have in the West, through the hero's journey and kind of the adoption of that by popular entertainment, this idea of the strongman leader as being the model, and I always go back to it's all the kind of the kings, queens, princesses, and princesses. Like you got to run around and find the true king to succeed, whether it's Arthur pulling the sword out of the stone or Leia is a princess in Star Wars, which is kind of interesting because we overthrew royalty as a functioning form of government more than 200 years ago. And there just is not a decent functioning royalty out there anymore. There's a lot of figureheads, but there are things. There are strongman leaders. There are generals. Those are generally not pleasant societies to live in. And yet we keep kind of coming back to that in the fiction. And what I love about the found family is it's giving us the other look at it. It's giving us the group dynamic as the solution. It is democracy as messy as it can get, where everybody is to some extent contributing in. Maybe one person's kind of the central decision maker, but at some point they are going to go off and either change their decision or collaborate with somebody else to solve the problem. And that I think is very interesting. And it also sets up the dynamic that nobody in the group has to be Superman. Nobody has to have extraordinary powers because the group as a collective is the extraordinary power. That's the whole point of the heroine's journey as well. She may be the catalyst that brings them together and drives them to the solution of the problem. It is the group as a whole that is stronger than usually the single person they are opposing. So again, just because Honor Among Thieves is around, or Wednesday Addams, you've got like the one kind of big bad that they're going to take down and defeat. Well, they don't go one-on-one, they go group on one, and that's how they win. And I think that's, it's a very interesting dynamic to play with, and it allows you then to acknowledge the strengths and weaknesses of everybody in the book, which makes for a lot of good character interaction. Which is why I love writing it.
I'm really interested in that idea of the leader and the caretaker potentially not being the same person. I just to be very anecdotal, when I was watching Steven Universe, I was talking to a friend and saying, who's in charge? And I was like, well, Pearl's in charge. They're a family, and she's clearly like the head of the family and the domestic anchor. And they were like, they're at war. Garnet's in charge. Garnet's the military leader. And I was like, And yeah, depending on how you, I think one's very much the caretaker and one's the kind of getting stuff done person. I'm thinking. Oh, sorry, Jen. Oh, I thought you were looking in. I'm interested in where.
I felt like I got called on by the principal. Like, what did I do?
Don't worry.
Speak now. I'm interested. I mean, partly riffing on Sonia's question from the chat. Your conventional heteronormative family will have kids, and the kids must be taken care of, and that kind of welds everyone together. And I'm wondering about kids in found families. I'm really the extent to which everyone's really enjoying Pedro Pascal's kind of looking after a youngster roles recently. And one of my own favourites is Runaways, the graphic novel, where you've got kind of kids trying to look after kids, and that's just wonderfully chaotic. Do you think you need these kind of characters who need some level of looking after but have their own, bring their own things to it? Does that add something extra? Or kittens? I can work with kittens.
I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, with Pedro Pascal's roles lately, that there's been a lot of that, both with Mandalorian and obviously The Last of Us. And I actually saw a meme the other day about in Stranger Things, the sheriff. It was a back-to-back of the sheriff and him taking care of Elle, as well as Pedro Pascal's character taking care of Ellie, and it's like they look the same. It's just kind of funny how that's come up a lot lately.
Well, I think as we come out of COVID, we're dealing with that. I mean, how do we take care of each other? How do we support friends and family during a very dark time? I mean, this is not an easy time in the world, and I think that's the one somebody once said, like, the great Hollywood comedies, the great song and dances, Ginger Rogers, Fred Astaire, all those, they all came out of the 1930s, one of the darkest economic times in U.S. history. Why? Because people really wanted hopeful stuff. They wanted to go think that, yeah, there's a way we can sing and dance our way out of this, and maybe that's not realistic always, but I think this is one of the reasons why the found family so totally appeals. My first novel for Wizards of the Coast was Crypt of the Moaning Diamond, which is a complete, it's just a group, it's a band of adventurers. They all live on a farm together, but none of them only one of them is related to the other one, and it's kind of weird. And they're always going off, and they are the group. I mean, they're the group that actually everybody else envies, because they all have this good friendship. And it was silly and it was fun, and I had a really good time writing it. And the best email I ever got from a reader, I got a note from a young man who said, "I am sitting in Iraq on a military base, and your book made me laugh today, and that's so important because it was a really bad day." And I thought, okay, this is why I write. And I think we tend to downplay the funny, the sweet, the kind, the happy ending. But there are people out there who are having very bad days, and they need that. So, and that's what I think is what's so adorable about the found family. I mean, they're there to support everybody else who's maybe feeling like they don't have any family at all.
Thanks for sharing that. I think that's really important. And I know the word family is really fraught, especially for, queer people and all kinds of other groups. But I think it's a good word, more so than, band or group or, troop or cadre, although those have some real specific meanings for exactly what y'all were talking about, right? That vulnerability, that care. I think a found family, is what a lot of families are not, is a source of that care. Maybe sometimes imperfect, but that willingness to take care of each other reciprocally, I think is the key to that specifically why the term found family is important, I think. I was thinking, again, just if I could use the example of Critical Role again, I don't want to just talk about one thing, but I think there's a great moment, spoilers, I guess, for Critical Role from 3 or 4 years ago, where everyone thinks that one character, Caleb, is taking care of a different character, not. And she reveals in conversation, she's like, no, I take care of him. She's this chaotic little goblin rogue, and he's, an adult wizard, but an adult wizard with PTSD and a lot of issues. And it was a really great moment in the show, and I think it really crystallized for me the importance of having those caretaker roles in a group. And then as the thing went on over a couple of years, that changed a little bit. He was taking care of her in different ways, and I think that's why family is such a good word for this, because we take care of each other. Sometimes you need help, sometimes you need an extra hand or whatever, and then sometimes I need help, and I think in a family, ideally, right, which is I think if we're creating them, I'm with Rosemary, I want them to be not perfect, but ultimately good and wholesome and happy families. And so I think that's why some of us create them, why a lot of us consume them, is that's what we're looking for.
Yeah. I've got a bonus question at the end about if we get a chance about dysfunctional found families, but this is all making me really heartwarmed, so I don't want to. And a shout out for the Expanse in the chat.
Yeah,
and also for Time Sensitive Zaddies, which I'm good with. Talking of tough times and making your own families, I did want to fit this in because I know Jen, I know you're a keen D&D person, and I know Rosemary, you've written with Forgotten Realms. During COVID lockdown, I did a year-long RPG on Zoom, and it was pretty much the thing that kept me going. And I felt like the characters within that, absolutely, we kind of welded ourselves into a found family, and it was really lovely because of the reasons that you've been talking about, that you could have characters within that who wouldn't really make it on their own, who lent on each other in various ways at various times. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out and say, is there anything particular about your experience of role-playing games that's fed back into the fiction, or are there things that emerge with friends around the table?
Yeah, I would definitely say, and I've definitely had the same experience. I was one of the things I was so devastated to lose, as we all had our things that we lost in early 2020, was my D&D group. And we even met in a pub, so it's like doubly bad. Like, we couldn't group together, and we certainly couldn't group together in a pub. And but I started in the spring of that year, I started a group, and then in the fall of that year, I started a different group on Roll20, and both of those groups are still going. And luckily for me, some of those people are local to me. They're not necessarily far flung, and I have become fast friends with a couple of those people, and I treasure that so much. It's like our real life, party has bonded in much the same way that our characters have bonded. In fact, for example, one of our groups, the ones who's mostly everyone's local, we went to see Honor Among Thieves together. We just all put on our wizard hats and nerded out and went to the theater. So it's definitely, I mean, that's what I love about RPGs, and my book is very much that model. Like, it is, it is not literally a role-playing game narrative. I forget, I know there's a specific word for that. Somebody in the chat put it. I know there's a word for that. When you have a book that's based on your role-playing campaign, but it's like that, where you have like different characters, right, who have different skills, and they, there's two of them, and then they meet a third one, and then they meet a fourth one, and for various reasons, they don't literally meet in a tavern, but it's it's a similar kind of thing. This person wants the same thing I want, or has skills that I need to help me get the thing I want, and then by the end they're a group. So they're a little bit more dysfunctional, I'm afraid to say, at least in the short term, but
we can survive. Oh, so I very much enjoyed, I was playing a complete guileless fool. It was very relaxing, and one of my friends was playing somebody who's kind of profoundly cynical, and I think either of those would have been really wearying to read as the hero of anything, but the dynamic was really enjoyable, and I think I made the right choice. I think spending a few hours a week just responding in a joyful and foolish fashion to things was exactly the thing I needed at that point. Chaos Gremlins in the chat, which I've not come across.
Oh, I will play Chaos Gremlin anytime I can.
Oh,
RPGs are
yes.
really interesting. Somebody threw that out, which is basically kind of fiction where you're literally going through levels and Player One, and I think is a really good example of that. But yeah, I know I don't write it, but and I'm not really consuming it because I'm often historical fantasy so much, but I do chat a lot with people who are writing it, and so um yeah, it's kind of around that dynamic again of forming the group and succeeding through the group, which is so interesting. And I do think um you know again there you can tell the lone hero story and you can succeed in telling the lone hero story, and it can be a fascinating story, but um if you're somebody who likes to write conversation, which is me, the group dynamic is so much more fun. So if you've got a lot of people who are going for a goal, and again you can kind of then build the more realistic way, I think, to succeed in toward the goal, which is that everybody contributes a little bit and stuff like that. But no, there's so many different ways to spin off it. So it's I mean, every time I read one of these books, I'm like, oh, that's really cool, and I really like the dynamics of these characters, and I don't feel like I feel like there's just infinite variety in the trope, and that's why it's so much fun to play in that sandbox
Mhm.
and to read in that sandbox.
I'm going to ask if anyone out there has got questions for any of our fantastic panel. While you're having a think, I am going to throw in the question, the evil question, which I didn't mention in advance. And I was thinking, if you can have a found family, obviously you can have a found dysfunctional family. I was thinking about things that are more cult-like or unhelpful, and all these sort of I really liked Greg's formulation about you've got a shared enclosed space, and that might be a school or a spaceship or a quest, and any of those can go terribly wrong. So yeah, anyone got any kind of family-like setups where you wouldn't want to be anywhere near it? I was mainly thinking the Midwich Cuckoos, but that's
yeah, that would be one. I'm thinking the author is KJ Parker, who's always got very strange relationships going on in his books.
got to vote for Firefly as dysfunctional, which is interesting because they
absolutely.
they also up on the top list of
but Firefly, I feel like they end up getting each other killed, but they are kind of working.
I would say break bills and the magicians. I'm thinking about like schools. I think that's a good example for me.
Yeah, it's like cultivation of intense loyalty, and then if you don't deserve it, then that's rough.
Yeah, but I would say, like, if you get into somebody, like, he writes really dark, but if you get into KJ Parker, the Engineer trilogy, Vices and Desires is one of them. Often around groups of people who really probably should never ever be in the same room together and are gonna end up killing each other at some point or getting each other killed. Just phenomenal writer, but also writes under Tom Holt, much happier stuff. But I am, that would be one of those. And there's some out there. I mean, I don't necessarily like, but I will read some of those books sometimes because they're so much fun. I'm doing a panel right after this one with Kate Hartfield, about writing in IPs, but she writes historical fantasy. She just did the embroidered book, which is basically about Marie Antoinette and her sister and all the family relationships there that Maria Theresa built up through Europe by marrying off all her children to various royal houses. And if you want to do totally dysfunctional family, there's a phenomenal book, and everybody in it. I'm sorry if this comes as a shock, but Marie Antoinette does not end well. But yeah, it's a great book about family relationships, and how they can both pull you up and pull you down.
Yeah, I can't think of any specifics off the top of my head, but I think the most fun kind of dysfunction for me comes when you have kind of the rule follower, the letter of the law type person, and the rogue in the same found family. And
Yeah.
they're just butting heads around every corner, even though they both want the exact same goal. It's just they go about it absolutely different ways, and they just eat at each other's nerves the entire time. I always think that's a fun dysfunctional dynamic.
Yeah.
The
And so,
rogue.
yeah.
The
And so
rogue, for sure.
he was saying, do you do extra character work when you're writing found family stories? I mean, now to me, because that is what I do. I mean, my characters will wander off and have long conversations with each other and not solve the plot problem until I beat them back into line. But but I think it is you find your own voice. And so it kind of is what fascinates you. And with me, I'm always fascinated with the relationships with people and how people key off each other's relationships, good and bad. I mean, sometimes, sometimes we've all got those friends who we adore and we know we cannot put them in the same room with somebody else, or it's going to be a very bad dinner that night, or there's that, we talk, we kidded about the drunk uncle, but, there's always that one relative who one on one, they're phenomenal. But if you bring them into a group with somebody else from the family, it's going to be the worst Christmas ever. And so, and we all learn to maneuver around that one. So if you've never had to maneuver around that one, yay. But
I mean, hopefully we learn.
yeah, hopefully we learn. Maybe that's maybe the dysfunctional family story you tell is the person who keeps trying to do the same thing over and over again and keeps getting into the same problem. Yes, KJ Parker, that's a phenomenal writer.
Thank you. So it is a super interesting question from Stephanie. So I'll throw it over to the others. Is there any other work you do around characters when you're trying to write a found family to get that balance or the voices or that kind of friction that we were discussing about people trying to fit together?
I don't think there's extra character work. It's just you keep manipulating the characters until they kind of like have those conflicting conversations, and maybe it's adding a couple things as you're going down the road. At least that's how I take it.
So
Yeah,
like
I mean,
more stress or opportunities, or sorry.
No, please. No, I was just gonna say, I think in a way it's easier. It's less work for me than I don't write things with solo. I think since I've been playing D&D before a lot of people at this conference were born, I think in terms of the group, and so for me it would be harder to just have one character do it all. I think the writing the characters, there's a dynamic there that kind of feeds, feeds my creativity and feeds the narrative. So I don't know that I could write a different way.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah,
it's
I think it's finding how people are going to interact, and then kind of also, again, going back to the person who is the hero or the heroine, is where do they fail in relationships? Because you can't have, like you said, you can't have a novel if they succeed in the first chapter. They've got to fail. And maybe it's they don't take into account what other people want, or they're not interpreting what other people want really well. I mean, I think if it's poster child for Honor Among Thieves, but if you go back to Ed, who's our main dude in Honor Among Thieves, and he is a super nice guy. We want him to succeed in his relationship with his daughter. He's going to go and rescue her. That's kind of the main quest of the movie. And yet you can see him failing in that relationship. Even though he's really trying to do everything right, he's failing because he's a dad with a teenager, and he's failing in all those ways that dads just do when they're trying to communicate with another little person.
I think if I could I'm sorry. I just wanted to say, I think he realizes that he's failing,
Yeah.
which is what's key about that character. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, and that's I mean, what parent do you know that doesn't know that? I mean, every parent I'm friends with will come in and go like, my kid's driving me crazy and I love him so much. And what do I do in this situation? It's like I have one friend who's like, yeah, I occasionally call her up and ask her if I can buy her teenagers for help on a project. She's like, yes, can I sell them to you today? Like, will you take them today and get them out of my house? But she doesn't want me to keep them. She wants me to give them back. So yeah, I think everybody goes through that. But I think we also have friends that are like that. Like some days it's like I really want to be with this person, and some days it's like you and me, we should not be in the same room together. And so it's having them hit that point, and that causes the failure of the quest, the puzzle solve, allows the second person to be murdered in the murder mystery, or whatever it is that the plot problem is, then sets you up for the next thing and the next thing. But the thing is about the found family is the reader really wants them to succeed. They're really invested in the relationship working out. It's the spin-off. It's why people read romances. They want the couple to come together and find love and succeed. I mean, the unhappy romance will sell well. Titanic is a great example of that. But the happy romance sells really well too, because a lot of people just, they get very invested in, they want this to work. And I think that's the thing about the found family is the reader really wants it to work. You want the crew of the Firefly to make it out. You want them to come through at the end.
That is a super lovely note. Are we allowed to run right up to the hour? Do people want like a 5? No, we need a 5 minute round.
I haven't
Yeah,
run
because I know Rosemary and I are on a panel right
Absolutely.
after this, so need to
Yeah.
switch over tech-wise.
Aurora, I'm so sorry we didn't get a chance to talk about kind of gathering families in video games, but I will share with you an amazing thing I saw recently, which is about an adventuring party going beyond the map in Red Dead Redemption together, and that is one of the most moving things I've seen recently, where they were on a quest to try and break the map and go out beyond the mountains. So yeah, I will wrap up here and say, anyone want to mention anywhere they're speaking at the rest of Flights of Foundry? I will say an hour 17, there's a panel on writing found families, exploring tricks to give your characters a sense of home. So you might want to come back for that, but don't, because I'm also doing a reading in that slot, so come to that instead. I'm going to put my short fiction collection in the chat. Anyone else want to mention where they're going to be, what they're going to be doing?
Well, Greg, you said you have one at 1.
Cool.
Yep. We have working with IP, Rosemary and I, and that'll be next in a couple of minutes. And I'll be on the panel tomorrow. I can't remember exactly. Let's see, hour 29. How hard is science fiction? How hard enough is it? How getting the science right type of thing. So.
And I'm on a whole bunch of panels, and probably too many to name. So, but I'm on one at 6 about upcoming trends in games. So if gaming is your jam, hit us up, and after you go to this next panel.
Oh, that's phenomenal. May come to that.
So 1 o'clock is my next panel, working in IPs. What's it like to write for Wizards of the Coast and Aconite Books? And if you've got questions for me, if you're still on Twitter, I'm at twitter.com, Rosemary Jones. I love interacting with people there. I'm also on Discord, and I'll be bouncing around in and out of stuff for Flights of Foundry, so you can usually find me somewhere in the Discord.
Thank you all so much. I feel that we and the attendees we are a family. We're going to work out the rough patches, and we're going to work out what our roles are and what we're going to contribute. And thank you all so much. Have a fantastic convention.
Thank you.
Thank you for moderating.